faithfully conveying value, interpreting great books from around the world. Hello, this is Sally's Book Club. Today we're introducing the book, The Evolution of the Chinese National Character by best-selling history author Zhang Hongji. When discussing national character, you might immediately think of Lu Xun and his novels, harshly criticizing it. For instance, in works like The True Story of Ah Q and Kong Yiji, you can see cultural sedimentation shaping national psychology. The sedimentation profoundly influences behavior and thinking patterns, albeit in rather negative ways. Take Ah Q. He constantly uses spiritual victory, always claiming, "My son is richer than yours." He bullies the weak but fears the strong. When starting revolution, his first target is the marginalized mummery. Instinctively worshipping power. When slapped by Old Master Zhao's relative, his legs trembled uncontrollably during court interrogation. Then he naturally melt down. Here, Lu Xun has a bystander pinpoint Aku's soul in 3 words: slave mentality. So, is this truly China's national character? Why did it become this way? If you share these questions, don't miss The Evolution of the Chinese National Character. This book reveals how China's national character evolved and why people became as Lu Xun depicted. What attempts have enlightened intellectuals made to reform national character since modern times? First, let's examine how China's national character developed and transformed. Zhang Hongji argues China's national character underwent 5 stages from pre-Qin to Qing dynasty. From spring-autumn, aristocratic ethos, Weijin clan culture, Song commoner culture, Yuan Ming road culture, to Qing's slave culture. Just these terms suggest China's national character trajectory. Over 2 millennia, it's shown a clear downward trend. So what exactly happened? Let's explore each stage, starting with aristocratic ethos. During spring-autumn period, China was feudal with hereditary aristocracy. Nobles valued dignity over victory, honor above life. This was remarkably similar to medieval European nobility. Let's examine 2 examples. The first example is the famous Battle of Hongshui. This story illustrates that righteousness outweighs victory or defeat. During the war between Song and Chu states, the Song army arrived at the battlefield as scheduled, only to find the Chu troops still crossing the river. A Song officer told Duke Shang of Song, "The Chu army outnumbers us in direct combat. Victory is unlikely. Let's attack while they're crossing. That will ensure our victory." But Duke Shan refused, saying, "No, attacking now would be dishonorable." Duke Shang waited until Chu forces fully crossed and formed battle lines before attacking. Ultimately overwhelmed, they suffered crushing defeat. The Duke was wounded in battle and died miserably the following year. Boom. To later generations, Duke Shang seemed pedantic, even foolish. But in his era, people held Duke Shan in high esteem. For instance, the Gonyang commentary on the Spring and Autumn Annals states that even King Wen of Zhou couldn't have handled it better than Duke Shang. Sima Qian, in the records of the Grand Historian, also noted that although Duke Shang failed, many gentlemen considered him praiseworthy. Now, consider a second story. This one speaks of duty outweighing life and death. The story of Qi Zhu assassinating Duke Zhuang of Qi. Duke Zhuang of Qi was having an affair with Qi Zhu's wife. When Qi Zhu discovered this, he feigned illness to lure the Duke to his residence, then had his men kill the Duke. And afterwards, Qi Zhu ordered the Grand Historian, "The ruler was killed for harassing my wife. To preserve the ruler's dignity, you must record he died of illness." But the Grand Historian replied, "Recording truthfully is the Grand Historian's sacred duty." He then inscribed on bamboo slips, "Qi Zhu assassinated his ruler." Enraged, Qi Zhu drew his sword and killed the Grand Historian. The succeeding Grand Historian still wrote, "Qi Zhu assassinated his ruler." Refusing to accept this, Qi Zhu killed him too. What happened next? The third Grand Historian arrived and wrote the same. Qi Zhu assassinated his ruler. At this point, Qizu relented and allowed the record to stand. But the story continued. A historian named Nanshi, hearing two Qi historians had been killed, rushed to Qi with his bamboo slips. He intended to write, Qizu assassinated his ruler, if the third historian was also killed. This exemplifies the aristocratic ethos of the spring and autumn period. Righteousness above victory, duty above life. But all this was severed by the sword of Qin Shi Huang. Qin Shi Huang unified China, abolishing the aristocracy system, and with it vanished the aristocratic ethos. Understand that aristocratic ethos didn't emerge from thin air. It required substantial wealth and status as its foundation. As Guanzhong wisely said, when granaries are full, people understand propriety. When well-clothed and fed, they know honor and shame. Only when basic needs are met can people spare time and energy to cultivate dignity and refine their demeanor. The aristocratic system of the spring and autumn period perfectly met these conditions. Nobles inherited lands, wealth, and titles from ancestors, receiving exclusive education emphasizing courage, dignity, grace, and honor. These noble qualities were reinforced generation after generation, ultimately crystallizing into that era's precious aristocratic ethos. But after unifying the six states, Qin Shi Huang abolished aristocracy. Nobles were stripped of titles and lands, executed, exiled, or forcibly relocated. Like earlier Qin nobles, they lost privileges and became imperial servants. With aristocracy's foundation gone, its ethos became history. After aristocratic ethos vanished, clan culture emerged. The Qin dynasty collapsed after just 2 generations due to tyrannical rule. Entering the Han dynasty, emperors faced a problem. With nobles gone, who would govern? Relying solely on meritorious officials and imperial relatives proved insufficient. Thus, Han rulers created the recommendation system, where officials nominated talents to court. But consider, who would officials recommend? Naturally, they'd prioritize relatives, friends, and acquaintances. Essentially, they recommended fellow elites from upper society. Exceptional talents from lower classes had little chance unless extraordinary. Over time, elite families flourished, forming powerful clans known as Shijia Dazu, influential aristocratic families. These clans monopolized official positions, creating the scholar official class, Shizu. Shi meaning scholar, official, simply put, the governing class. This class formed during Eastern Han and peaked in the Wei-Jin period. During this era, China saw centuries-old prominent clans like the Longye Wangs and Chenjun Shis, who migrated south with Eastern Jin, and northern families like Qinghe Kui and Fanyang Lu. For generations, they held high offices and intermarried, forming an immensely powerful force that remained largely unaffected even through dynastic changes. Hence, a saying emerged: emperors flow like water, but aristocratic families are as solid as iron. Indeed, during the Three Kingdoms, Western Jin, Eastern Jin, and Northern and Southern dynasties, emperors changed rapidly like a revolving lantern, while aristocratic families stood firm as Mount Tai. Over time, the power of these families grew to rival the emperor, with some highborn clans even looking down upon emperors of lesser lineage. Thus, more intellectuals from these families stopped directly opposing power and began pursuing their own individuality and aspirations. This leads to another characteristic of clan culture: contempt for the powerful. For example, the great calligrapher Wang Shiji repeatedly declined high-ranking official positions offered by the court. Another case is Ruanji, one of the 7 sages of the bamboo grove. Sima Zhao, a powerful Kaowei minister, wanted to form a marriage alliance, but Ruanji despised him and avoided proposals by drinking heavily daily. For 60 straight days, matchmakers found him drunk, forcing Sima Zhao to abandon the plan. At this point, you might think these clan elites were overly arrogant, perhaps a few were virtuous, but most relied on corrupt power deals among officials. But the truth is, Few great families lasted centuries through corruption alone. Most depended on solid family reputations. Through excellent family education, they nurtured outstanding talents, enabling them to endure centuries of turmoil. To maintain their advantage, they painstakingly crafted various family rules and instructions, cultural statutes and models. For example, the famous Yan family instructions was the pinnacle of aristocratic family education at that time. So, in a way, clan culture had a flavor reminiscent of the pre-Qin aristocratic culture. Within it, moral integrity remained the spiritual hallmark of this era. As aristocratic monopolies flourished, children from humble backgrounds grew discontented. Do commoners have no talent? Therefore, during the Sui and Tang dynasties, emperors created the imperial examination system to alleviate this class conflict. The imperial examinations during Sui and Tang dynasties were just small scale, averaging only over 20 admissions per year, merely symbolic appeasement for commoners. The imperial examination system truly became influential in the Song dynasty, marking China's transition from clan culture to a commoner culture phase. Song emperors used the imperial exams to select talents on a large scale, primarily aiming to replace military officers with civil officials, not to ease conflicts between clans and commoners. From the mid-Tang and Lushan rebellion to the Song dynasty's founding, constant warfare prevailed, mainly due to repeated military rebellions. To end this, Song rulers completely removed military officers from power centers, depriving them of rebellion capital, and naturally replaced them with civil officials. Thus, Emperor Taizong of Song greatly expanded the imperial examinations. This move sparked two major societal shifts. Social mobility began, allowing commoners to enter the upper class. The other was the loss of martial spirit among Chinese men, who became more scholarly and less robust. First, the imperial exam system had one advantage. It didn't ask about family background. Regardless of whether you came from a prominent or humble family, excelling in exams went rapid advancement. At that time, many talents from humble backgrounds rose through the exams, hence the familiar verse, "A farm boy at dawn, by dusk in the emperor's court," meaning one could discuss state affairs with the emperor shortly after being ordinary. But Song's commoner culture drastically reduced Chinese martial valor from spring to autumn to Tang. Chinese revered martial prowess. Ugh. Spring and autumn nobles were scholars off horseback and warriors on it. Some even drew swords at the slightest disagreement. Uh, Tang poets declared, "Better to be a captain than a scholar," but Song's proverb became, "A good man doesn't become a soldier." Suppressing military officers made Chinese lose martial spirit. Men no longer took pride in battlefield glory or dying in action, but advocated to fulfill ambitions, diligently study the six classics. Thus, the frail, pale scholar became the typical Chinese intellectual image. The Song dynasty had its good and bad sides, but overall it was still an era worthy of aspiration and respect. However, after the Song dynasty, China rapidly slid into the abyss of rascalization. In the late Southern Song period, the Mongols invaded. The Mongol Empire differed from any previous dynasty in Chinese history. They had no interest in ruling the Han people, nor in learning Han cultural knowledge. Traditional values passed down by China's upper society for millennia suddenly abandoned. The Yuan dynasty officials were mostly illiterate Mongol nobles. They were inefficient and severely corrupt. Local officials, unsure how to judge cases, dumped all matters on their clerks. With power, the clerks extorted and blackmailed, ignoring right and wrong, only caring who paid more. In a society where money and power ruled everything, people abandoned old moral ethics and began changing their living conditions by any means necessary. Wealthy merchants used money to bribe officials and collude with Mongol nobles. Smart Han Chinese impersonated Mongols, to secure official positions, while more attached themselves to powerful officials, obeying their orders to do evil. These people formed a class that later became common as local tyrants, thugs, and rascals. The common saying, officials and bandits are one family, probably started from this time. For example, Yuan dynasty minister Harajing used ruffians as enforcers to lend at usurious rates. If borrowers couldn't repay on time, the ruffians would brand the faces of their wives and children, enslaving them. Another example, the Yuan dynasty decreed that Han Chinese could not serve as Diragachi, the highest local officials. Some Han Chinese, to become Diragachi, imitated Mongol lifestyles to impersonate Mongols. These were mostly street ruffians of low character. Once in office, they brazenly twisted truth, desperately amassed wealth, worsening the corruption in Yuan officialdom. This phenomenon later became an intractable problem for the Yuan dynasty. Thus, from that time, all of China entered a phase of rascalization. If observant, you might notice that before the Yuan dynasty, storytellers in tea houses delighted in heroic tales like The Orphan of Zhao and Jin Ke assassinates the King of Qin. But by the Yuan dynasty, most dramas featured protagonists as corrupt officials, cruel clerks, local ruffians, and scoundrels. The plays overflowed with plots of brothers killing each other, husbands seizing property, abandoning the poor, and breaking family bonds. Familiar dramas like The Injustice to Do A and Romance of the Western Chamber all belong to this category. By the time the Yuan dynasty collapsed, when the Ming dynasty was established, the rascal-style survival code was already deeply ingrained. Thus, though Ming claimed to be a Han Chinese dynasty, its reality differed little from the Yuan. Kowtowing to power, attaching to eunuchs, forming cliques for personal gain, the Ming court was a cesspool embodying all these vices. Ming emperors themselves epitomized such rascal behavior. Founder Zhu Yuanzhang came from rascal origins. Unsurprising, Emperor Yanglei Zhu Di retaliated against political enemies by forcing their wives and daughters into prostitution. Emperor Zhongde Zhu Huzhao was notoriously rascal, adopting over 100 ruffians during his reign. He adopted sons during imperial tours, drew lots with ministers for drinking contests, yet shamelessly reneged when losing, utterly devoid of imperial dignity. The late Ming saw Qing conquest. Queen rulers recognized Han culture's benefits, voraciously learning its essence, mastering autocratic techniques better than Han themselves. All historical threats to imperial power, powerful ministers, maternal relatives, eunuchs, factional strife, none gained foothold in Qing. Moreover, Qing rulers surpassed predecessors, molding subjects into absolute slaves. Emperor Yongzheng declared, "Ministers must covet neither profit nor good reputation. Fixation on reputation hinders wholehearted service to the emperor." King emperors wanted dog-like obedient slaves, not ministers with independent thought or aspirations. Yang Mingshi of the Yongzheng era was an official who upheld personal integrity. He dared oppose imperial opinions and implemented policies easing peasant burdens. But by claiming credit instead of attributing good deeds to the emperor, he earned personal renown, earning Yongzheng's disgust. Soon, Emperor Yongzheng fabricated charges to imprison Yang Mingshi. Among Qing's tactics, the literary inquisition stands paramount. Emperor Qianlong perfected it. Any content could be twisted into subversion if Qianlong willed it. Once labeled subversive, scholars faced execution by slow slicing or family extermination. Under Emperor Qianlong's insane intimidation, intellectuals dared not voice opinions, dare not take initiative, dare not correspond, even dare not keep diaries. Their sole life goal became currying favor with the emperor for promotion and wealth. Liang Shizheng, a retired grand secretary during Qianlong's reign, once revealed his official tactics to Fu Luhun, the provincial judge of Zhejiang. He said, "Writing invites trouble. officials must exercise extreme caution in all matters to avoid future consequences. He added that during his tenure, he never communicated in writing. If absolutely necessary, he immediately burned the documents afterward. Um, Shang Hongji notes that through relentless efforts, Qing rulers established the most meticulous, perfected, and unshakable autocratic rule in Chinese history. Comparing vertically across Chinese history, you'll find the Qing era was when people's rights were most thoroughly stripped. The era when scholars' will was most suppressed, its people obedient, exceptionally patient, indifferent, numb, and utterly devoid of independent thought. Chinese ultimately became as Lucian depicted. So why did Chinese turn out this way? Are there deeper reasons behind this? Superficially, each transformation from spring-autumn to Weijin, Song, then Yuan Mingqing had distinct causes, but looking deeper, each shift essentially strengthened autocratic rule. And Qin Shi Huang eliminated aristocracy, establishing the supreme emperor system. Emperor Tazu of Song destroyed the nation's martial spirit to prevent military threats to imperial power, weakening Song militarily and leading to its fall under Mongol invasion. The Mongols conquered the Central Plains, exterminating those with rebellious spirit. Finally, Qing rulers used whips and blades to subjugate Chinese into slavery. Hence, the author concludes that millennia of Chinese history is essentially a chronicle of autocratic technique development. At this point, you might ask, how did such autocracy originate? Some claim Qin Shi Huang's emperor system marked autocracy's beginning. But that view grossly overestimates Qin Shi Huang. Autocracy neither started with him nor would vanish without him. Autocracy's emergence connects to the very origins of human nature. He turned the women and children in his household into his dependents. Because compared to female heads in matriarchal societies, male heads have inherent advantages over family members. First, he possesses physical strength advantage and can use violence against disobedient family members. Second, he can generate more wealth and deprive the disobedient of their livelihood. This unequal family model, when expanded outward, gave birth to autocracy. But this alone doesn't fully explain the phenomenon. Historically, patriarchal autocracy was a universal phenomenon worldwide. Yet with historical development, some places gave birth to democratic systems, like ancient Athens in Greece. But why didn't similar democratic systems emerge in ancient China? And why did ancient China progress further down the autocratic path, leaving other nations far behind? This brings us to China's geographical characteristics. Zhang Hongji argues that China's geographical environment caused autocracy's frenzied development. China's geography has a notable feature: suitability for agriculture. A key characteristic of agrarian societies is generations repeating identical survival patterns. An individual's life experience rarely exceeded their ancestors' knowledge. You farmed land inherited from your father, using methods he taught. Obeying him virtually guaranteed a smooth life. This reinforced patriarchal autocracy. Another agrarian feature was large populations. Farming was easier than seafaring exploration or violent colonization. Thus, population grew faster. China faced population pressure while other regions remained sparsely populated. So, excessive population competing for limited resources made war inevitable. Victory required disciplined groups obeying commands absolutely. Disciplined tribes achieving more victories further entrenched this mindset. Over time, tribal leaders gained power over life and death of every member. By now, you can see the prototype of China's autocratic society in these primitive tribes. The entire tribe formed a strictly hierarchical pyramid. Women obeyed men, children obeyed fathers, juniors obeyed elders, subordinates obeyed superiors. Once grasped, power is never relinquished. It only grows, craving more. Early China seemed less autocratic, simply because autocratic techniques weren't yet mature. From the legendary Yan Emperor and Hong Emperor to Yao Xun, Yu, then to Sha Shang Zhou, and on to Tang, Song, Yuan, Ming, Qing. The so-called decline in national character is essentially just rulers step by step overcoming autocracy's technical challenges, eliminating fewer opponents in society in an endless upgrade. Now, let's move on to the last issue. Since modern times, what attempts have awakened intellectuals made to reform the national character? Since modern times, many intellectuals have advocated for improving national character, with the three most representative being Liang Qichao, Lu Xun, and Hu Xi. First up, let's talk about Liang Chao. He was the founding figure in reforming national character. He believed that to save China, we must first change the national character. Only with good citizens can we build a good political system. So he published tons of articles harshly criticizing the issues with national character. These articles sparked strong reactions among Chinese intellectuals. Thus began the wave of national character reform. Lian Qichao systematically summarized the problems in China's national character. Later reformers of national character basically didn't go beyond this scope. Liang Chao believed there were three huge problems in China's national character. The first is slave mentality, enduring a tyrant's oppression without daring to resist. The second is lack of unity, valuing personal morality but ignoring public morality. The third is low public intellect, shying away from challenges, lacking martial spirit and drive. To tackle these, Liang proposed reforming national character. He thought awakened elites should enlighten the masses top down, specifically by starting newspapers, schools, writing novels and plays to educate the people. Oh, Liang favored writing novels most. He wrote some himself, but it didn't work out well. Liang Qichao's idea of saving the nation through novels influenced the next generation of intellectuals. Lu Xun's generation was way more radical than Liang. They argued to save China, we must dump traditional culture and fully westernize. After the Qing emperor abdicated in 1912 and the republic was founded, these intellectuals were really happy for a while. But then came Yuan Shikai's restoration, vote rigging, and warlord conflicts, totally disappointing them. Completely disillusioned, Lu Xun turned to national character determinism. And he believed it must be flaws in the Chinese people that made advanced systems from Europe and America get totally twisted here. It was during this period that Lu Xun wrote The True Story of AQ. However, after writing and criticizing for 20 years, Lu Xun found national character not improving but worsening. Struggling in pain and despair, Lu Xun encountered Soviet class struggle theory late in life. Soviet success inspired him to believe only class struggle could save China. Finally, let's discuss Hu Xi. Before the May 4th movement, Hu Xi's views largely aligned with Lu Xun's. But the astute Hu Xi soon realized that national character reform theory was a false proposition. Both Liang Qichao and Lu Xun advocated first training citizens before building democratic institutions. From the history of autocratic techniques discussed earlier, one can clearly see institutions shape national character, not vice versa. Without institutional change, talking about reforming national character is simply laughable. So after May 4th, Hu Xi proposed institutions first theory, establish basic democratic systems to train qualified modern citizens. Practically, a democratic government should teach people democracy basics step by step, learning to be masters of their nation. Chaos during this process, vote rigging, reckless elections, are necessary growing pains. Persist with democratic politics and dawn will come. Yet, his advocacy for a government of good men with Beiyang warlords became a joke, and with Nanjing nationalists, it vanished. Finally, even he himself left for America. Well, we've covered most of the book. Let's summarize. From spring to autumn, to Tang to Ming to Qing, Chinese character underwent a waterfall-like decline. Just national character became a heavy topic in China. Author Zhang Hongji believes no nation besides China has so despised its national character, nor conducted such vigorous reforms. But what were the results? Perhaps this question deserves every Chinese person's continued pursuit. Well, this concludes our interpretation of the evolution of the Chinese national character. Listening notes are below the audio. See you tomorrow.